So, RPGs. They're long, time-consuming, and we do them quite rarely on this channel. So, what do you think we would do for our next RPG on BrainScratch Commentaries?
A short one released only in Japan.
Perhaps a Final Fantasy game? Persona? No, let's do that one Sailor Moon RPG that came out back in 1995 that we never got over here.
But for some reason, we've had a translation patch for it since like 2002. Like, this thing's been translated for a while.
We had a translation patch and then a retranslation patch. It's actually a pretty well-loved game, so I wanted to give it its due. And I also just wanted to talk about Sailor Moon, because I'm a nerd and I like to talk about things that I like.
Yeah, so we brought someone who's big into Sailor Moon. Hello.
Hi. Hello.
Introducing Kitty.
Kitty Crystal, yes.
Who is with us for this playthrough, which is more than I can say for Ted and John at the moment. But unfortunately, stuff happens. Perhaps they'll join us in another 8 parts, and
that'd be nice. That'd be wonderful.
They can be the outer senshi. They come in later.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. So this is Pretty Soldier Sailor Moon Another Story. It came out in 1995, as I said, and it has the distinction of being actually pretty damn good by the standards of Super Nintendo RPGs of the time.
For a licensed property aimed at little girls, only released in Japan, this is way better than it has any right to be.
Yeah, it kind of does. The most notable thing about it kind of sounds bland by today's standards, but like Final Fantasy VI had come out like a year before this. Not a lot of RPGs had an extended cast of playable characters in quite the same way that we're used to in RPGs today. So Another Story here is probably most notable for having, like, what, 10 party members?
every senshi,
Yeah.
including Mini-Moons here.
Yeah. Not Tuxedo Mask, though, because this is anime continuity, and anime Tuxedo Mask is a rose-throwing useless sack of trash.
He's got the roses.
He doesn't really do anything. He gets kidnapped a lot, but he only ever seems to remember how to fight when he's under the enemy's control. So, I mean, manga Crystal Tuxedo Mask was never afraid to Superman punch a monster in the face, but I don't know. 90s anime Tuxedo Mask doesn't ever want to do anything useful.
My job here is done, but you haven't done anything. Sorabada.
He's just there for Usagi.
So, this game takes place after season 3 of the anime, I want to say.
Yeah, because the outer senshi are here.
Yeah, the Outer Senshi are here. They talk about beating Deathbuster, the Deathbusters and Death Phantom.
The Chaos Emerald is shaking.
It's vibrating.
I don't know what season 3 of the anime was like, but it's not really important to know like which version of the story you're picking up from, because like Another Story just sort of doesn't bother trying to stick to just one. It like brings in stuff from the manga, and the story structure is a lot less like the episode to episode Sentai action of the anime. So, you know, no matter which version of the story you're coming in from, you'll probably have a good time with everything in this game, except Tuxedo Mask, who is a rose-throwing useless sack of trash.
It also looks like he has glasses on in his Sprite.
Yeah.
In this alternate continuity is Melvin, who is married to Serena. And yes, Lewis and I are the old guys of the group. We still remember them as their English names a lot.
Well, I'm actually more accustomed to their Japanese names now, because like
It's been so long.
Yeah.
But
my history with Sailor Moon is pretty lightweight. Like, I watched an episode or two here and there on TV when it just happened to be on, but like I didn't follow it the way I did like Dragon Ball Z or Rurouni Kenshin Yu Yu Hakusho or anything like
Makes
that.
sense.
This is like, if it was on, I enjoyed it. But I certainly watched enough to remember what the old dub was like.
Oh, yeah.
The highlights were, let me see, Serena sounding like a hyperactive 30-year-old for most of the series. Darien sounding like he's high.
Like he's high.
Everything involving the Outer Senshi.
Cousins.
Zoisite being a woman, and yeah, those are the highlights, I think.
Yeah, they made them cousins, which somehow made it worse.
Oh, God.
It's like, yeah, and Zoisite.
Zoisite's weird because I see a lot of conflicting reports whether that was intentional or because they didn't know. They just kind of assumed the long-haired, pretty-looking boy was actually a girl.
No, actually, one of the other dubs, one of the foreign dubs, voiced him as a woman. And I think another dub voiced him as a woman based on that. And it was kind of like a game of dub telephone. But I'm not sure whether or not that affected our dub or not. But like several dubs voiced Zoisite as a woman purely by accident.
Totally an accident.
And it's funny because like the only functional reason to do that would be to cover up the like homoerotic subtext between Zoisite and Kunzite. But like that wasn't in the manga anyway, so I'm like really ambivalent toward it. I really don't care one way or the other. It kind of just doesn't make any sense when you know who the four generals are. But
I mean, they're just there to kind of get beaten, so.
Well, in the anime they are, but there's a whole backstory to them in the manga.
Yeah.
Which is good, because they're like the only bad guys in that arc in the manga. So it's a good thing that they have something to them.
So, Kitty, what's your history with the series?
I watched it a lot growing up. I actually didn't even know that there were games until fairly recently. Like, oh my gosh, yeah, I watched it a lot growing up, and I watched it in high school a good bit. And actually, one of my first cosplays was Sailor Mercury. I love Sailor Mercury. I relate to her a lot.
Okay, original Deke dub or something more recent dub-wise? Or in
I'm
Japanese?
actually not entirely sure. I watched the original show on TV. It was definitely the English dub. And I've watched a lot of the variations, like Crystal. Like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, if it was on TV, it was definitely the old Deke dub then.
Yeah.
Yeah. What made me want to pick up this game was because I don't know what sparked the curiosity. It was because it was on Hulu, and my phone plan comes with Hulu. So I was like, oh, Sailor Moon's on here. Sailor Moon Crystal's on here. Now is a good time to watch these two shows, see how the old one holds up, see what the new one's like. Because, like, it's free, I might as well.
Yeah.
And before I knew it, I'd spent, like, way too much money buying the Blu-rays of both series, and the rest is history.
Just remember, Mama was fine. Oh my gosh.
Okay, for any oldies out there who don't know the Japanese names of the characters, okay, the ditz formerly known as Serena is Usagi Tsukino, or Tsukino Usagi. If you say it in the correct order, it translates to Rabbit of the Moon. So yeah, there's punny names like that in this series.
To give the old Deke dub credit, they did a decent job actually giving them Americanized Western names as a result of that, because her name in English in that dub is Serena, which has moon connotation, so they at least were aware of what the names were supposed to be.
That and, well, her past life, she was called Serenity anyway, so it all comes together. Damian Shields is just random American names thrown together, though.
Yeah.
So, and you know what? I'm not even gonna ask where they got Negaverse from. It
was very early '90s Saturday morning cartoon thingy.
That's just dramatic nonsense, really. Okay, so about this fan translation patch, because if you're interested at all in playing this game, you have to know which version to get.
Mm-hmm.
There are two versions of the English translation. We're playing the improved version, version 2.08. and it's generally an okay translation. I wouldn't put it up there with like the Mother 3 fan translation, but then that was done by an actual professional localizer, so you know, standards are pretty high over there.
Also, the game has a 10-minute intro cutscene.
And it's, yeah, and this is all before the title screen, so you can skip it if you want, but in any case, oh yeah, and there's this nice little 16-bit rendition of the Sailor Moon
theme song,
opening theme. Funny thing about that, the Deke Dub opening was like, they changed the lyrics around so that it's all about Sailor Moon when it used to be a love song, but like the actual music that went with that opening theme was just a re-instrumentized version of the same theme that the show used in Japan. And this show didn't change its opening music until like season 5. So
they got a lot of mileage out of it.
Yeah.
They did.
Never gets old.
It's actually kind of awkward. Actually,
it even has the original anime music in here. like the little save menu music is actually from the show.
Yeah, they did a good job of you know, hitting all the notes, both literal and figurative, that fans would expect from a Sailor Moon game. So, you know, props to that. I will also give them praise for just the general aesthetic of the game, how the menus are in like this doodled-on little notebook.
I really love the way it looks.
And there's just a border around the screen that looks nice too. Although at times when I'm exploring certain areas, I feel like I could use that screen real estate. But you know, you take the rough with the smooth. The other thing that, like, I'm actually kind of slightly on and off about is the fact that all the dialogue just plays over the rest of the screen without any text boxes or anything to give them a background. Sometimes, like right now, it looks fine, but depending on what background you're playing against, sometimes it gets a little bit muddy. Like the text doesn't quite. We're on a low-res 16-bit screen. We can't do stuff like drop shadows or like clearly defined borders around every letter. So sometimes the text isn't as visible as I would like it to be.
Chapter 1, Hell Destiny. Wow, this got dark.
Also, in the old translation, Chapter 1 was called Her Destiny, which, you know, sounds like it could be correct. Until you realize it's not.
Yeah.
The old translation is still pretty interesting because, again, it is so old. It's from like 2001, 2002. And there weren't a lot of those back then, so it's a little piece of internet history there that you can still actually download and play.
Fan patches from that time had a tendency to be either hideously wrong in places or overly painfully literal, and yeah, let's just say I'm glad that we've moved past that era. I mean,
the weird thing is that patch is still playable. It's not amazing, but I can still get through it.
Mm-hmm. It's a pretty straightforward game, all things considered. It's not as explorative as even like the 16-bit Final Fantasies. When you're in a chapter, you're in a chapter, and your goal is pretty clearly defined. And a lot of the time, you'll find an NPC walking around that asks if you need directions, and then they'll just go through a checklist with you of things that you should be doing in that chapter, and they'll ask if you've done them, because apparently the game designers couldn't be half-assed to program these NPCs to know what you've done already. So, if you just say yes to everything, you'll get a neat little checklist of everything that you should be doing in that section. So, there are in-game spoilers. In-game gameplay spoilers. It's a bit weird, but
also you're not doing the Mume feature, as I call it. If you hold L, I believe, on what's equivalent to the Super Nintendo controller, Usagi goes at light speed.
Oh my gosh.
The run button, yes, she actually can keep up with the cars.
What?
I will demonstrate this multiple times over the next few parts. She's always late to school, so she's always running to school. She's had a lot of running practice. She could be a track star if she could only apply herself.
Does she run with slices of toast in her mouth?
Yes.
Has she ever done that? I'm trying to think.
I'm sure she's done it once.
Yeah, I'm
she's probably
pretty
done
sure
it
she's
once,
done it.
But it occurs to me that I've never seen an episode in which that happens. I know she's late to school.
If you want to know how old that trope is, Evangelion was making fun of it.
Yeah. If Evangelion is making fun of you, you must be doing something wrong. I'm sorry, I know, I'm bitter, but I just can't see any appeal in that series, and everyone around me likes it. I'm just, for once in my life, I'm that guy.
You like what you like, and there's nothing wrong with that.
It's more like I just can't watch that series without rolling my eyes, so it's probably the most malicious I've ever felt for a piece of pop culture. In any case, this tutorial room has big old pictures of the icons you're going to be selecting in battle.
That's pretty helpful.
They're all pretty self-explanatory, except for the rabbit icon there, which is actually a picture of Usagi's rabbit backpack. So that's your item icon. So yeah. Something to keep in mind is that, like, one of the things about the UI in this game that doesn't quite work is actually the battle menu. There is a border that highlights the icon that you're on, but it's, like, barely visible. So the game is, like, purely turn-based, so you always have a moment to stop and check, but sometimes it's hard to tell which icon you have selected until you move the cursor. It's yeah, not perfect.
Everyone keeps telling us to go to the arcade and the clock shop.
Yeah.
The arcade and the clock shop are just the tutorial areas.
Yep. And the nice part is, if you're playing this game again, you don't have to do that at all. You can just go to where the actual result is.
Yeah. And, of course, the place we actually have to go is the jewelry store, which is...
We have to go visit Molly.
Molly, or Naru, as she's known in Japan. The living, breathing, walking magnet for all monsters within 100 miles. This is purely an anime thing, but a disproportionate number of the monster incidents, at least in Season 1, had to do with Naru. So, like... In Sailor Moon fanfiction, it's actually quite common for Usagi to just, like, follow Naru around whenever something new is happening in town, because she knows a monster is probably going to be involved at some point.
Hey, hi, Melvin.
Melvin, Umino in Japan. He's the annoying nerd. Actually, in the manga, he's drawn all squiggly-like. So, it's a little bit like in One Punch Man, where, for effect, certain panels or certain characters are drawn intentionally poorly to give them a kind of, like, lazy look. It can be effective to just get a certain feeling across. Not very many manga authors do it, and, you know, I'm glad for that, because I get the feeling that if people did it more often, it would lose its appeal. It would lose its punch when it's actually done right. Punch.
That guy back there was squatting over the claw machine.
Hello, Mamoru's best friend, who doesn't matter much to anything.
Motoki's his name. I don't even know. Did he even get an English name?
I'm sure he did. I just don't remember it.
He's the guy that I stumbled over Serena and Usagi at the same time for a second there. He's the one that Usagi has a crush on for like 5 minutes at the beginning of the series before
Darien shows up.
Tuxedo Mask happens. Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, the jewelry store, the site of the first episode's monster incident. So, you know, nice little bit of fan service there. So the battle system in this game, it's pretty fun when you have a full party. So of course, the entire second chapter is a series of adventures in which you play as, like, the individual Sailor Scouts, one at a time with no party. One of the few missteps that this game makes. But, you know, honestly, it's a fun game. There are, like...
Make up!
Every character has special attacks. You have up to 12 action points you can use on your special attacks, and they recharge every battle, so you don't have to worry too much about conserving them. But you also have link attacks, special attacks that 2 or 3 of the Sailor soldiers can do all at once.
Come on, Sailor Moon, say the line.
I'll punish you.
Yay.
If, say, Usagi starts a link technique with Sailor Mercury, it doesn't stop Sailor Mercury from doing another action on the same turn.
Here we go.
So...
This is bullshit. Sailor Moon would immediately be running away the second somebody attacks her.
Crying.
Okay.
Right away into the tiara.
Let's get this out of the way. 90s anime Sailor Moon, actually 90s anime everyone, nobody ever really develops as a character because they don't want anyone to change too much from episode to episode. That way, you can watch the episodes in any order and still, you know, feel like you're following the series well enough. That's just, you know, an incident of the structure. I want to point this out. In the manga and Crystal, Sailor Moon grows into a fairly competent lead by the end of the first arc, which I should mention is 2 volumes long. So very early in the series, she gets her act together and is a fairly decent superhero. And this game seems to follow, like, a lot of the, at least the character progression that you would expect from the manga. So Usagi does whine a little bit, but she's not her 90s version. She's a lot closer to her manga counterpart, and that's good.
Yeah.
Because, like, you know, I don't think I could stand it if Usagi was the way she is in the anime a lot of the time.
Also, I could tell the translators were having fun with this because Naru, said a line that was purely from the English opening.
Oh, there's also a throwback to the Japanese lyrics as well. The line about miracle romance is like just as transparently a reference to those lyrics as that line was to the English lyrics.
Yeah. I'm curious as to what kind of hoops would need to be gone through to kind of get this release, because this is a perfectly viable translation they could do if they wanted. The problem,
at least on...
Yeah, the problem is just Naoko Takeuchi is very protective of the rights now after the whole Deke dub.
The translation here is at least on par with what you would expect from a Super Nintendo game of the time. In a lot of places, probably better. But this is the beginning of something that... Okay, so this never came up at all in the anime, but it was an element in the manga where the 4 generals that worked for Queen Beryl were actually like Prince Endymion's 4 generals from his past life. It never came up at all in the anime because, like, they were just bad guys. So this game sort of treats it as the first time that any of the Sailor Scouts are hearing about it, but it's kind of cool that they brought it in. Because, like, not only were the generals, you know, the prince's, like, right-hand men back in the day, but due to shenanigans, they all wound up falling in love with a different Sailor Scout. Which makes it kind of tragic when, in the manga, every one of them winds up being killed by the Sailor Scout they wound up falling in love with.
And then at the end of that arc, everyone died. The end, and then Usagi hit the reset button.
So, they brought this plot element into the game, and it's gonna come up in a big way in a few parts. But for now, it's time for a Sailor Scout Hangout.
Always at Ray's place.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty convenient place. It's a secluded shrine off in the hills where they can just, you know, gather together in a room and talk about both personal things and superhero things without risk of being overheard. Because there's a shrine and hardly no one comes here. It doesn't help that there was a haunted bus incident like right down the block and people thought like the shrine was cursed for a little while. Yeah.
They're all reuniting.
Well, Venus isn't here, but people always forget about Venus.
Yeah, we're missing some people.
Venus is weird because she comes so late in the first arc.
Well, yeah. That made sense when the manga was running, because the manga was running parallel with the Sailor V manga at the same time. So Venus had plenty of character development 2 pages that away. Yeah, but we haven't had an anime adaptation of Sailor V. There was one planned to go with Crystal, but stuff happened and I think plans for that fell through. Which is a shame, because I'd actually like to see that.
I think it also doesn't help that she's also, you know, long hair, blonde, and it kind of just makes Usagi and her kind of merge a little bit in people's heads.
Yeah.
They're actually supposed to look alike, because apparently, like, the first thing... Actually, no, what am I saying apparently? I watched this arc, and then I read this arc. The first thing Venus does in the manga is pretend to be the princess.
Really?
Which is funny, because in the 90s anime, they ask her if she's the princess, and she says no. So... Yeah.
There she is.
Hey there. So... Yeah, looks like I'm straggling again. There's a joke in there somewhere. Okay, all 5 of us are together. This isn't going to last for very long, but... Yeah, our first mission in the game actually does involve a full party of 5.
All right, this guy. The college student who's hitting on a 14-year-old constantly.
Not like they're in middle school or anything.
You know, now that I think about it, 90s Sailor Moon was very, like, nonchalant about either an older guy liking a younger girl or a younger girl liking an older guy. Because, like, that whole thing with... which one was it? Nephrite. Nephrite and Naru. That was weird. Made even weirder when, for an entire episode, the series seems to forget that Naru exists right after she watched someone die and is horribly traumatized. But then they just segue into Sailor Jupiter's introduction pretty much exactly as it happened in the manga. And Naru isn't there at all, and Usagi seems to have forgotten that Naru exists. And then in the exact next episode after that, she's back to being worried about Naru. It's very awkward. But, like, all in all, one of the things that I actually, like, really like about this game is the sprite style. And this seems like it might be a slightly weird thing to highlight, but I'm used to a lot of 16-bit RPGs having this sort of short, big-headed, chibi Final Fantasy sort of style. But here, it seems like the game is more Phantasy Star 4, I want to say, where everyone is a bit more taller and not necessarily realistically proportioned, but closer to
Yeah, they're definitely closer. I really love the way that they did this game. Like, they just look so good. Like, they definitely shouldn't be chibi.
It feels like there's more room for, like, character detail. Like how Jupiter over there is in a different uniform with a longer skirt because she's supposed to have a delinquent appearance, and apparently that's what a delinquent appearance looks like in Japan. Just being in a different uniform and in a longer skirt, because...
I think it was because she transferred in since she was still using her old uniform and then just decided never to change for whatever reason.
Well, yeah, but this is like 2.5 seasons later.
Yeah, I know.
She's still doing it.
I love the original Deke Dub's explanation as to why Ray's in a different uniform. It's like, she goes to a private school. It's like, what?
What? Okay. But, like, wearing a different uniform is a delinquent thing to be doing. It's the same thing that Yusuke Urameshi did in Yu Yu Hakusho. He's wearing the green jumpsuit instead of the blue.
Shut up. I look better in green anyway. It's like, do you, Yusuke? Do you?
I think he kind of does.
Boy.
This is exactly the kind of shenanigans that these girls get up to on a daily basis in the 90s anime, though. One of them goes off to do something like go meet a boy, and the other ones are and the others are so like curious about it that they outright stalk them. At one point, for like half of season 5, Ray keeps showing up at the other girl's school even though she doesn't go there because the starlights are there. She just keeps popping up, and it's like a running joke because, like, Usagi and the others are like, wait, don't you go to a different school? Why are you here? If only that season was better than it was.
I mean, that whole thing was basically anime only. Mostly, anyway.
Yeah, well, most of the 90s series was basically anime only. They had to stretch everything out because, like...
I'm talking about, like, season-long arc stuff.
Oh, yeah, but, like, the manga was still running alongside the anime as well, so,
Yeah.
like, they also didn't know where anything was going half the time.
Oh my.
Oh, boy. So, I think here, the only thing that you really can do is just talk to the others. Because we need to wait for the train to come in. There sure are a lot of conveniently placed Luna P dolls lying around.
And no one seems to care.
What even is this thing? It's a toy based on Luna from, like, the 30th century. I don't know why these are lying around.
I mean, gameplay-wise, are your save points, but it's just one of those in-universe
Yeah.
things. It's like, what are these doing here, and why is no one questioning it?
At least it's not like a weird question mark made of light with a swirling circle around it that's just sitting there for no reason.
Oh boy.
There's a monster on the train. A singular monster. Remember that, people.
There's something on the train.
I don't know if the police can help.
Get the police. The police are never going to show up on time.
We are the police.
All right, so...
Inami seems unconcerned.
Uh-oh.
The first section's pretty simple. It's just a linear dash through a train to fight some monsters and rescue Ami's totally not boyfriend. One of the things that you're going to get really tired of as you play this game is that whenever battle happens, that soundbite plays. It's a voice sample, a glorious 16-bit voice sample of the girls yelling "makeup," which is the last 2 words of their transformation. That happens every time that a battle happens, and it's not a very good soundbite. Impressive for the time, but not a very good soundbite at all.
Oh well, we'll get into the long corridor of random battle so you can learn how to use your teammates in the next part of Sailor Moon.
Mm-hmm.